Good evening, councillors. A member of the public stroke interested party. Qualified vote. Very good. Right, first item on tonight's agenda is to receive and accept apologies for absence. We have had apologies from councillors Davis and Jones. Do we accept those apologies?
Yes.
Right, well, the very next item is representation from an interested party. Lisa Ward Holmes, who used to live almost opposite me a few years ago now.
Yes.
She speaks in connection with Angle Town Football Club and plans for a new
Yes.
excellent.
Yeah, we were really keen to sort of touch base with you in our initial sort of thoughts of planning. Obviously, with the club building as it is, and with the club house being in disrepair and in desperate need of a revamp and a refurbishment, I've got a lease with Elder School for another 25 years because we initially had a 30-year lease. We're now our main priority was getting the grounds prepared for the football to happen. Now that we've secured some good grant money and we're doing the maintenance on that with the money, I think we're feeling like we really need to push on and get the clubhouse sorted. It's in Elder School's interest that the clubhouse is, reinvested in and, ripped down and built as proper units. At the minute, it's just containers. And obviously they are very, very old. They're from the building the A605 and they put them together to make a clubhouse. So financially, it's a burnout because it's got no insulation, it's not a proper building. And it's just basically needs to be torn down. We've got a development committee that we've drawn together this year. Again, most of us are coaches or parts of the committee, so our time's limited. Once we get a bit more off the ground with that, our plans are to call in help from specialists like architects and everyone and that's when I think we can draw on a bit more interest from the parents and people in the public that might be interested in helping us along the way. But we're trying to sort of build a little team that we know exactly the direction we want, exactly what we need. So I think we just wanted to say this is what we're planning. Hopefully it'll benefit us. I know it will benefit the community. We've got over 500 players with the club at the minute and their families. So I just think that we all thought it would be really good for you guys to know what we're doing, what we're planning, what we're hoping for. Obviously, if any of the councillors did want to get involved and help us along the way with their expertise or their passion for the town, that would be equally as wonderful to have. But we will carry on doing our best to provide for the community and to hopefully get better facility down there. But at the minute, we are doing the best we can, which is pretty good because we're doing a great job at running football in the community, but it would be great to have something a bit more solid to be running it from. So,
Do you have a sort of budget for this yet?
to be honest, no. There's various. It does depend on what we need to get some proper drawings. We know the size of the changing rooms, we know the size of ideally what we'd like. I mean, we'd love a 2-story building that overlook the pitches with windows and, lovely seating area outside. I mean, it's pie in the sky really. Funding is available, but again, with the location, whether or not we need to look at sort of planning and what we'd be allowed to have there. Then there's, of course, the problem with the existing being sort of where we would like to have the building, because running all the water and electricity into any other area of the whole site would be extortionate. So there's a few logistics to get through, and obviously planning logistics and restrictions. So we know what we'd like, but we haven't got any drawings or anything to present because it's still sort of pie in the sky at the minute. There is funding in the council, to be honest, although we know about it ourselves because we're on email lists, but the council have been brilliant at actually forwarding us emails from Stuart Smith, who we're already in contact with and who's visited us a few times because we are a key site. We've got quite a lot, for the county. I think we are one of the top 5 in the county for numbers of teams in the whole county. So although we're a small club in a small town, we are actually pretty good on the football front. So they're keen to invest with us, and they've shown that by giving us, some good grants with the actual pitch funding, the grounds work. But and there's talk of Astro and all sorts. But so we know there's funding out there, and we know about the other pots of money that we're be able to dive into. But again, it's sort of people power as well as time. So it's time, people power. So it's what we're lacking. And with the start of the season, there's always something with the start of the season or registration. It's been a busy time and busy summers for all of us that are involved. So we'll get there, I'm sure. But and we've got amazing, group of people behind us that we just need a few more. But until we work out what we're doing, I think then we can present something proper for everyone to follow suit and get excited about.
Yes, isn't the funding for this new, if you want that funding, it has to be a partnership with the local council or something like that, is that how I read it? Or did I read it?
There's quite a few ways of going about it, and it's sort of, do we go down the FA route because there's restrictions on what you use and what you have it for, and then there's other pots of funding that might be equally as beneficial to us, and it's all about, but for us, we sort of want it to be a community resource as much as a football club.
Yeah, because that's the point, if you get that funding.
Because there's another box to tick there, and I think, we've got such a big site down there, and the community are down there all the time, apart from when it's school on. But I don't know if you've ever driven by there, there's usually a group of, youth playing down there, which is amazing, and it's great to help provide a place for people to be. It's not very much fun picking up the litter after, but it is good, and we're doing it because it makes you feel good of being part of something that is allowing people to be active. And we've got a great bunch of over 50-year-old walking football and walking ladies now. So we're providing football from literally 4 years old to, I think our oldest was about 80. We're working on that.
No, I think so. The football club is brilliant. I mean, obviously, my son went through it, so we're very happy memories of doing that sort of stuff. So, no, got no more questions. I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, so I think this is so central. I think we were just hoping not to get the council backing, but just to let you know what's going on.
Yeah.
We met with Elder School in April, I think, and just gave them a bit of a, got them in, because they've all changed hands, and the people that signed the lease with us originally have completely changed hands. And I think a lot of them didn't know much about what we did, or even the fact that the land was, it was sort of a real unknown. So we introduced ourselves to the new team, and we're hoping to get them on board, and we know that they need us to do certain things for the community before we get to the planning stage and everything. And so we do know, and we'll honour our commitment to them to make sure they're part of the journey with us. It would be fabulous for them to say, right, that's it, we're going to help you financially as well. It would be a drop in the ocean for them, but that didn't seem like it was on the cards in the initial discussion. But obviously it's their site, we're pouring £17,000 a year into the grounds work, which is an obscene amount of money, but it just goes into grass seed and sand. So that will all improve for them, so eventually when they do get it, it will be a really good ground to be using. So hopefully eventually they will come around. I'm sure they'll contribute at some point to the fact we're developing it and be wanting to be seen to be part of the community and the part of the clubhouse as well. So I can't imagine it going. I know Fairline are interested in being part of the build in some process. They've sort of expressed interest in being a partner within the community that have helped us along the way. So, but financial terms haven't been discussed or anything, so not there yet. But at least they've been supportive in the idea of it, so which is exciting.
Brilliant. Yeah.
Well, I think what we'll do, we might put this on the next agenda, simply to have a chat about it in principle.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, when you've got some drawings and things, please come back to
We
it.
will, yeah.
I'm also going to suggest that we mention this at full council, simply to see if either A, any councillors are interested in becoming involved directly,
Thank you.
or B, if they know of somebody who might be interested
That would
in
be really
becoming involved
helpful.
directly. I mean, there's certainly one of the key things you're going to need is somebody who knows their way around grant applications and grant funding.
Yes.
There's a lot of money out there.
Yes. If you know what
If you know where to go and what
to say.
necessary to get your hands on it.
Exactly.
In Blackthorn, they just developed this playing field, which was a sort of £400,000 plus project, the vast majority of which came in grant funding from all over the place, not from Sport England, but also from a lot of other sources.
It's like Kingscliff has got fantastic.
Yeah.
But I think that we are likely as a council to be extremely supportive.
Yeah.
I say that wearing a personal hat at the moment rather than speaking on behalf of the council, but I'd be absolutely astonished if we were anything other than supportive.
No, I hope so. Yeah, because I was thinking about Section 106 funding and all that kind of stuff, and we have reached out to the Blackthorn people because they've reached out to us as well, and Kingscliff, we've reached out to them as well. So we are trying to use our contacts, but again, it's time and everything. So if there was anybody that would be keen to be involved, it would be, it would, I think it would benefit all of us in the community.
I presume you've spoken to the cricket club, have you?
We have spoken to them, and not specifically what the Allendale one or the Benfield.
Well, the Animal, they've got a nice clubhouse. So they're sort of like a role clubhouse,
Yeah.
although it's a different sport.
Oh no, well, it's all the same pretty much. But yeah, we have made links with them. We let them borrow our roller, and we're doing things with them, and we've been talking. But until we get sort of more specific information, our site will be different to everybody else's, obviously. So, but yeah, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to me.
No, thank
And
you.
I'm hoping next time we meet, there'll be a bit more to discuss. But
Yeah, brilliant.
Look forward to it.
all right, great.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel.
Keep up the good work.
Thank you so much. Thanks, guys.
Now,
Dynamic
you
duo.
Sorry.
A dynamic duo.
Right,
Take care, everyone.
Bye.
next item was a sort of provisional, because we weren't quite sure
yes.
whether anybody was coming.
I didn't get a response, so.
But nobody has. But we do tend to get bombarded, or at least I personally tend to get bombarded with stuff from storage, which I'm trying to parcel. So let's move swiftly on to declarations of interest. Does anybody have any disclosable pecuniary interests? Do we have any other interests?
No.
Can I just say, for the purposes of this, that the application in respect of the house in the garden of 16 Mill Road, which is Andy Crawshaw and his wife, they are both quite well known to me, and since my daughter has actually expressed an interest in buying the property at one point, and may or may not still do so, I will mention that.
Could you tell me the address of that?
It's in the garden at 16 Mill Road. There's a typo in my note, I've noticed, it says Crashaw, and it should say
Apollo
Crawshaw.
House.
It's in the garden of Apollo House.
It's near the
Which
bottom of the
is,
page.
At 1032, and in terms of our applications,
Right, I don't seem to have that sheet.
it's the very last one, because we're not talking about the
Not got the red line
land between St Christopher's Drive, etc.
through that page.
Apollo House, 16 Mill Road.
I've not got that sheet.
One at the bottom.
Well, never mind, it'll be
It'll be
a
on one
voyage
sheet
of
back.
discovery for
And
you
I
as we
thought
go through the planning
I won't bring the
application.
laptop because I don't need it. I've got the print.
You've got the paper.
Not to worry, we'll move on. So, actually, before we move on, we're supposed to do the minutes of the last meeting. So, minutes of the meeting held on the 2nd of August. Present were Councillor Arnold, myself, Councillor Clark, Councillor Jones and Councillor Rycroft, two of whom, of course, were there as councillors because we'd invited other councillors to attend that meeting because of one of the items on that agenda. Now, only two of the four of us were actually there. So, with your leave, I'll propose the minutes and look at Councillor Arnold.
Yes.
He's going to say it 30 seconds.
I do.
Bear with me, because there's multiple pages of this. Right. Well, that brings us on to the planning applications themselves. Now, we have it a bit easy when it starts. If we start off with trees, we continue with trees. The trouble is, it's the second half of this meeting that's a little bit more complicated. So the very first application, which actually isn't a tree, Alvin Church of England Primary School, they want to install an air source heat pump, which necessitates some associated works, and basically we want to get rid of the current gas-fired boiler plant. I have to say, it looks like a complete no-brainer to me that we would probably support the application for its environmental effects. In fact, it's probably going to provide a more efficient heating system for the school. Externally, the thing is that it's going to be surrounded by a 2.5 metre high kind of wooden compound. I think the purpose of that being to try and deaden the sound so that it doesn't become a noise nuisance. Now, as ever with these things, if you look at the paperwork on the portal, you get all sorts of information about decibel readings under this condition, that condition, and the other, none of which I suspect any of us are in any position to comment on or query or anything else. I think we have to leave that to the experts at NMC.
And also the primary school, people are advising.
Well, we're not going to want it to be super noisy on their own site, because it's going to affect them directly, I'd have thought. But I guess that if we were going to make any comment other than supporting the thing in principle, it is simply to ask that the council investigate the adequacy of the proposals for ensuring that there is no noise nuisance caused to relatively neighbouring properties. None of which are actually that close to it in any event.
No.
So does anybody have any
No,
queries,
No, I
questions,
think
or
go for it.
demur from that view?
Totally happy.
So, no objection. Just write subject to noise to emergency. Right, now we are into trees. The first tree is at 38 North Street, and it's a Leylandii, and essentially they want to reduce its height. There wasn't really a great deal of information on the portal about this application, so I could see that it was James Rowlett who was going to undertake the works. There was no obvious indication as to why it was being done, other than the fact that Leylandii get incredibly tall and do need to be kept under control. It's in a conservation area, hence the need for application. It seems to me to be tree husbandry, which we would not normally object to.
No,
so
no,
that be a tree officer.
Van the Leylandii, I say.
Yes, well, I'm beset at home at the minute.
Got several, hate them.
So the next one is at 24 Herne Road. This one is actually subject to a TPO. But what they say in terms of the application is that the tree has outgrown its surroundings, and essentially they therefore want to again reduce the crown by even more, in fact, than they wanted to reduce the crown on the Leylandii, remove all dead wood and included branches, which I think is a technical term as opposed to all trees don't have branches, and crown clean epicormic growth. If I had more time, I might have actually looked up what epicormic growth was. I have to confess, I have not the slightest idea. But it does again appear to be tree husbandry, and I would imagine that our reaction is the same as the previous one.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Third tree is at 42 West Street. Described as a conifer, This one they want to get rid of altogether. Described in the paperwork as being in poor health and of excessive size. So it's crowding out and shading, their terminology, both ash and lime trees. They say it actually poses a risk of damage to and restriction to access to the listed stone wall, because of its proximity to it. Again, the application is because it's within the conservation area rather than it is a protected tree in itself. I know that normally we are potentially more concerned when the application involves felling. I doubt very much that the tree officer is going to have any great difficulty with this, given the nature of the tree. Frankly, unless he thought the application was utterly ridiculous and that the grounds on which it is being sought just are not there at all, I can't believe he's going to worry. But shall we simply leave this one to the tree officer?
I think so.
Absolutely.
It's good having a tree officer, isn't it?
Very useful. Right. That's the point at which the easy bits are over. The next application is, in fact, 39 Wood Street. I immediately threatened because I thought, well, we've already looked at an application for 39 Wood Street, so I wrote down that it was the same owner and then realised, no, it isn't, on property. And as you can see from the fact that the note that I did occupies a page and a half, this is quite a complicated little application. What's more, it follows an application that we looked at last year, and which we did not like at all. In fact, as I started to talk about it, some of us may even remember the discussion we had. This was going to be a very, very futuristic looking extension, very, very lot of materials to a listed building. And we responded to that at the time by saying that the design and access statement had correctly described the proposed extension as, and we quoted it, a complete contrast to the host dwelling. We continued by saying the proposed works are entirely inappropriate for this listed building within the conservation area, would very seriously detract from it and adversely impact upon the conservation area. The use of teak timber cladding is out of keeping with the listed building, and any extension should be constructed in materials compatible with the existing structure. If there was to be an extension, windows and doors should be made of timber to match the existing. A flat zinc roof is entirely out of keeping with the existing building, and any extension should be roofed in colour western slate to match the existing. It wasn't only us who got worked up about it. The senior conservation officer made very similar comments. The county archaeological advisor didn't like it either because he thought that the heritage statement was entirely inadequate, and in fact pointed out that this plot shares a boundary with a scheduled monument relating to the old Saxon settlement. And so there had been a failure to address that issue and a failure to adequately consider the potential effect on the fabric of the listed building. And finally, Historic England didn't like it either, pointing out again that the proposed extension was contiguous with the scheduled monument, and there should have been an application for scheduled monument consent, which at that point there wasn't. Perhaps predictably, the applicant then withdrew the application and has now come back with a new plan. And it does seem as if they have taken on board a number of the points that were being made by some others. They have, for example, put in the application for scheduled monument consent, but it looks now as if somebody has actually grasped the nettle and said, well, actually, if we're going to do work to a listed building, you've really got to work with it, rather than produce something that is utter contrast to it. Property itself is part of a group of buildings on the west side of North Street, which are all Grade 2 listed because of the contribution that they make to the historic character of the settlement. It's an original 18th century construction, which which was then 2 stories of coarse rubble with a stone slate roof. It lies on the boundary of the site of the Saxon settlement enclosure, a scheduled monument, and is located within the wider area of the Saxon defended settlement. I read all of this bit on this application, I wasn't even aware of the Saxon defended settlement. According to the county archaeological advisor, the site is of high archaeological potential for subsurface archaeological artifacts. I might just break up at this point and say that it's pretty obvious that one of the things that is going to be necessary when work is carried out here is that it's done on the basis of whatever requirements the archaeological advisor thinks are necessary to ensure that nothing of value is lost and not recorded and so on. So what does the application say? Well, it says that the proposed works don't affect access to the parking at the property, which isn't surprising because it doesn't actually have a vehicular access in the first place. And it doesn't involve the removal or pruning of any trees or hedges. It then looks at the existing materials, walls, limestone and painted brick, new limestone and painted render. The roof, the existing, is a Collie Western slate, but a felt roof to an existing flat roof extension. And the plan would be to have blue-black natural slate and a metal sheet to a flat roofed extension. I have to say that the application was a bit difficult to follow in terms of the windows, because I have a feeling they missed the word timber out at one point. But I think that the plan is that the existing is painted timber and the new will be painted timber for both doors and windows, which again sounds rather more sympathetic than before. Current ground floor for the property is 61 square metres, and it will increase fairly dramatically to 81.7 square metres, but the external appearance of the building will remain essentially as existing. The external alterations and repairs carried out in post-matching material and construction techniques. The works will not involve any increase to the height of the building, and perhaps this is the key point. The design and access statement states that the existing 20th century extension, that's the problem. It may be a listed building, but at some point there was an extension built, I think possibly 1960. And that was going to be rebuilt. Essentially, you remove the existing works and reverse roofs and rainwater goods to be overhauled. Where rainwater goods are replaced, they'll be in conservation style metal finished in satin black to match the existing. And according to the design and access statement, generally the works will involve the careful repair and consolidation of the existing fabric and retention of important architecture, and reusing materials from the existing building where possible, but where new materials are required, traditional materials are to be used. Essentially, currently the ground floor is a dining room, living room, kitchen, WC pantry, and at the back a boiler room. The extension basically is the same as much as you have the dining room and the living room. You now get a much larger kitchen. The downstairs WC moves. There's now a new boot room and a study with bifold doors for the kitchen. Now, I don't know whether anybody wants to see this. We might want to actually look at the drawings as best we can, just to take a look at it. But the immediate observation is that somebody has now seemingly taken on board what they're dealing with and does seem to be coming up with a plan to
Is that the right one?
improve.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to think which one do you want to look at. So I did do this a couple of days ago. If you look at the And if you look at those plans and drawings, I think,
This one here, proposed
Yeah.
rock
you may find, yeah. So in essence, currently over here, there's a sort of flat roofed extension. And what we now seem to be getting is a roofed extension, but there will still be a flat roof on this bit. These are the bifold doors, and then you'll see the limestone walls and such like. It's quite difficult to figure out, but actually, if you now move it up, so there's the first floor plan which doesn't alter, and here now is the new ground floor. And essentially, what's changing is from here, kitchen gets bigger, and the bifold doors in here, the boot room, the study, and the WC. Whereas previously it sort of came, well, actually, I think, if you go back to, there is one which shows the previous
location plan.
one, but
Oh, sorry.
it's not obvious. But
Sorry.
oh yes, that one.
That's
Yeah, it's not that one. That's the existing site.
location.
But it is there somewhere.
Yeah.
Ah, there you go. Try
Yeah, there
that.
it is.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there's your dining room and lounge, small kitchen, pantry, WC, and there's a boiler room, and then a sort of little back hallway, as you like. So this is extended out. This is largely, I think, the sort of 20th century extension. So on the face of it, what's being altered isn't so much the listed building itself, but the 20th century extension, which was which had no particular merit in the first place. And it does look as if it will be done reasonably sympathetically to the building. I guess the question is, do the new plans and what we learned about it make us think differently to how we first viewed it, which was that what was being proposed was entirely inappropriate. Obviously, if you want to look at any other parts, the design and access statement is there and sets it out. I've sort of cribbed the key points from there into my briefing. Anyway.
I believe, I'm pretty sure I looked it up, I think it's from July last year.
Yes.
So it's just before I started, so this is new to me, but there is one main question I have. Can you just zoom in on that ordnance survey plan?
Yeah, but there's two, they don't make the bigger, do they? I'm trying to place
It's, just one more.
it. Keep, and then, right, yeah, keep going, then we can do a couple more.
Okay.
Needs to be bigger. Yeah, and then go right, so we can see where it is. I'm trying to work out what it is.
No, so it's
I'm
a little
trying
bit.
to work out where it is.
Yeah.
What
So
is it?
the question I have is just basic, really, is how on earth do they get
The building in there.
Yeah, so there's a building already there. How do they get the materials there? How do the workmen get there? Because looking at it from the Google Maps thing, there's a very small, I'll show you.
I mean, that's obviously a passage that goes back to the property.
Yeah,
The big question, I suppose, is, as you say, what's behind it there? I must admit, I don't know. Maybe we get sort of Google Street View up or something.
yeah, that's it, that is it.
I'll take it.
Should come round and look at the Google shop.
Well, I've got the slide there, it's
That's
there.
Yes, that's the passage.
They do it from the car park.
So they didn't even know they were in Carport.
Now, which.
I'm still designing this street, so.
Blow that bit up a bit.
Ah, that's where they are. No, that car park is Gascoigne. So you've got the gas out. So this house, yes, I know it now. Because okay, there is an entrance, there's a slide. Because obviously I think they get cars up there. But it's this house here. It's really weird, it's the one that butts, that's probably this, hang on. So that's the house. But if you know the Gascoigne, that's the school car park, that's the Gascoigne building. So it's literally the other side of the trees, the Gascoigne car park. But that's North Street.
Yeah.
So you're miles away from the street.
Oh, yes.
So you're right about
You
access,
have
but
to
there's
go up,
access,
it's a
there's
very
access
tight,
here,
tiny little,
there's access
It's a
there.
passage, basically.
it's a passage.
No, this is a car, there's a car. But I don't know how that reaches that. But it's a good point.
That's a
I mean,
it's a passage.
they're doing a lot of work, they might come in through the back because of the gas line. But it's a good question to ask.
Yes,
I think it's good, yeah, because it's weird.
and
It's a
that's,
weird one.
yeah, I seem to recall that we were, for example, very concerned at the works to the old Owen and Hartley shop.
Yeah.
Not because so much of the access, but, you know, vehicles parking and all the rest of it. We raised a point about all of that. That, of course, has just got planning.
That's right, because that's the gas line behind it, isn't it?
But you're right. I don't know how they easily access material unless they do have some kind of rights over the car park. Having said that,
Go on.
I am familiar with the title to a property a bit further along.
There we go,
Yeah,
that pink one.
access.
Um,
No,
That's no-
that doesn't that doesn't help. And certainly just thinking about a property a bit further along from there doesn't have any rights, for example, to access from the Gascoigne car park.
They don't, no, absolutely.
It's not like, for example, Lawn House, which has an entranceway into our car park.
Yeah.
Think about it.
Yes, it does.
If you look at the car park or the toilet block, and down that side,
Yeah.
there is a doorway in the wall there,
Yeah.
which opens out into our car park. And obviously, you have a right to come out and cross the car park. But there is nothing similar, so far as I'm aware, there. It's a contiguous wall. In fact, the other day, we looked at a tree application by the school
Right.
that was to trim back some of the trees along that boundary.
Yeah, the
I
only
mean,
one
whether
that had a right from that car park, from the Gascoigne car park, was Sue Thomas when she was down the back. But that was an informal arrangement for her to
Yes,
Climb
and it
the
might have had something to do with the fact of being
Yes.
head of Laxton Junior at the time.
climb the wall. It was totally for that.
Yeah.
She was allowed to climb the wall.
I mean, I suppose what we could do, if we're happy with the application itself in principle, what we could do, I suppose, is flag up our concerns as to quite how the work will be undertaken, in particular material is brought to site. Because of course, if anybody starts parking a skip or other stuff on North Street at that point,
You've seen skips on the
It's-
street.
not going to be easy.
No.
But I've seen them.
Oh yeah, I mean, doors wouldn't go right. So let's take it in two parts then, because I think the point Councillor Arnold makes is a good one. But in terms of the application itself, if we weren't concerned about this
It's like
access
normal.
point,
I don't know problems with it.
anybody have any issues with the revised application?
Well, they've listened,
Sorry?
they've listened to what.
Well, they appear to have done that, and it does seem to have taken on board very much what we said, and in which reassuringly we were not, as it were, alone. So perhaps we should say no objection, but
Access.
we have concerns about how the site will be accessed and supplied with materials.
Drones.
And therefore,
Yeah.
and we don't particularly want to see
Skips.
vehicles or skips parked outside on the road in North Street
Yeah.
because of the impact on traffic, etc. So if we make that the response,
These houses are very interesting on North Street, aren't they? They're almost bigger than you think sometimes.
Yeah, indeed. Right, well, that was an
Very
interesting
interesting.
one.
Yeah.
And now we move on to 18 Benfield Road, which is another application involving listed building consent. And this is the one where today Ian Page said, oh, there's some revised plans just come through. And therefore, if you haven't yet commented and are intending to comment, please comment on the basis of the new plans and not the old ones. So with that caveat, because what I wrote, of course, was based on the plans that were on the portal the other day, not those that have since appeared. I looked at those very briefly when I was in the office this morning, but basically wasn't in a position to judge too much what was changed.
Yeah, they've got the angles at the wrong side, so you can't really see.
They're not the best, they're really not the best set of drawings, etc. I've ever seen. The property itself sits at the end of a grade 2 row of listed cottages. This one was listed in June 1974, and there is some significance to the date.
Yeah.
It's within the conservation area. When listed, it's described as 17th century, cement rendered, which it wasn't cement rendered in the 17th century, so that's something that had happened by 1974, with stone slate roof and 2 brick-on-stone chimney stacks with 2 modern windows on the first floor, one on the ground floor with a plain door. There's a pedestrian access to the rear of the property. It's shared with numbers 14 and 16 and accessed by a gate. The application states there'll be no impact on access to parking. Sounds like a simple one to the last one because I don't think there was any parking on site.
Well, they've got the car park opposite them.
Yeah.
With no trees or hedges requiring removal or pruning. So the extension here, we know, was built in the 1950s, so 20 odd years prior to it being listed. The extension is 2.3 metres in depth, it's 2.65 metres high, with a slightly pitched roof. Its replacement would be 6.1 by 11.3 metres, so significantly bigger, but 2.6 metres high. Now, that was then. I believe that the new plan shows it at 3 metres high rather than 2.6.
Yes,
I think it still
it's
shows
3
it
metres.
as a flat roof.
Yeah.
As opposed to what is there currently, which is a slightly sloping roof to a much smaller extension.
Yes.
You can probably
There is a
pick up
difference.
a picture.
It's got a little car.
That's existing,
Yeah, so
that's what
Got
they
that little bump in
that's
quite
what
a contrast.
they worked on the
Absolutely super good.
parapet.
Yes.
Yeah, it's explained. Yeah, so you've now got also this sort of, yes, as Lisa described, almost a sort of parapet-like structure right at the end. The idea is to provide a larger kitchen, a shower and laundry room, a study and a sitting room. The existing walls are described in the application as rendered brickwork, with the new walls being constructed from coarse rubble limestone. Existing roof is Collie Western slate. The new flat roof will be GRP, with a roof lantern above the kitchen, which you can see, and a roof light above the shower and laundry room. The existing opening from the lounge will give access to the kitchen. The existing opening from the dining room will access the sitting room, study, and laundry shower room. Existing windows and doors, and all new ones, will be painted timber. As I said, the only response from Historic England was one of their sort of standard, this doesn't look good, is a matter of concern to us.
Being on the removing Collie Western slope.
Now, what is not entirely clear to me is if you picture the existing,
Yes.
fairly unlovely 1950 extension,
Yes.
it does have a slightly sloped roof. But I'm not absolutely sure what that sloped roof is.
Mm.
I doubt that it's Collie Western slate, frankly. And if you were going to put in a flat roof, kind of unlikely you would be using Collie Western slate for that purpose. And I think probably this is one of those ones, and it's a bit like the one we just looked at. If there had been no extension there before, and we were now looking at this proposal, we might be looking potentially slightly askance at it. But of course, what are they doing? They're removing a fairly unlovesome 1950s extension and creating a better modern extension.
Which then abuts onto brand new houses anyway, those flats.
Yeah,
So it's not like it's in the middle.
so there you go.
I've got no worries.
Anybody,
Oh,
any comments, concerns?
No.
Complete silence.
Well, I think because it abuts where the old garage was, which has been replaced by, I don't know if you like them, but those flats.
Yes, well, the ones that we've been looking at relatively recently, where there was the planning application,
Oh, yes.
that's the, is that the one you think?
No, the one that, what's down there, you've got the, I mean, having walked it a few times.
Do you know the opposite side of the road?
They're on the opposite side of the road, but they're on the road where they built all those new flats, which are those big, look like big houses.
Yeah.
So it's not going to cause any problem. It's not like a middle section, it's on the end. It's going to make it look better. I've got no problems with it.
I think fine. I agree with you.
Yeah, I also don't have a problem with it. I think it's an old direction.
Good.
Right, Apollo House.
These have been interesting.
This is quite
Yeah.
This is what I like,
interesting. I think we might be,
These massive things we have to worry about.
we
We get down to these, it's nice.
would like to get up the picture. So Apollo House
Let's have a look at this.
has a very big and, from pictures supplied, pretty overgrown garden. And the idea is to build a new house on a plot within the garden, separating off this new plot from the old one with a new limestone wall, more or less to match the one that runs along the length of the property along Mill Road itself. In the wall in Mill Road, you will see there is a wooden gate that gives access to the garden. That will become the access to the property. But it will mean widening it, which means that part of that wall will have to be demolished in order to give that slightly wider access. The property itself, as you can see, is sort of tucked away in the corner of the plot, so about as far away from number 16 as you could get it, but actually pretty close to properties in its immediate vicinity. It's going to be constructed in natural coarse limestone, a roof of natural blue-black slate, a ridge height of 6.1 metres. It's going to have a 90 square metre ground floor area, 75 square metres first floor, because it's kind of slightly chalet type. Windows and doors painted now. New vehicular and pedestrian access, which I mentioned, parking provision for 3 cars, which seems perfectly adequate. The current properties, access isn't affected by this. Apollo House itself is accessed via a gated entrance adjacent to the house. I mentioned the stone wall and wooden gate. Design and access statement indicates the ridge height of the new property will be lower than that of neighbouring properties, will not result in any overlooking or loss of privacy or cause any loss of light. It will be constructed to a high standard of thermal efficiency and so as to be suitable for the elderly or disabled. The design and access statement describes the garden at Apollo House as being extremely overgrown with quote unquote alien shrubs and trees. There is an arboricultural statement, and the DNA statement outlines the plans for the garden of the newly created property. The design and access statement's quite well done. It shows pictures of the neighbouring properties, indicating that the proposed construction of this property wouldn't look particularly out of place as against those in the immediate kind of vicinity. If you just scroll down through it, you'll see some pictures coming up. So there's one of the properties it's close to, and I think there is another. I think that's possibly it. There's the wall, the existing wooden gate, and I think we're probably all familiar. On the opposite side of the road, of course, is a run of cottages, which are, again, all great to listed.
Okay, yeah.
It's a big garden, it will take this comfortably. And there is a photograph somewhere in that design and access statement showing the overgrown state of the garden there. No doubt it was photographed with that in mind. That's Apollo House itself. I can tell you from personal knowledge, it was owned by Mr. Crawshaw's father, who has sadly died. So it's effectively a kind of estate sale. And there's one of the pictures of the garden showing that it's
Yeah, so it's a bit of a, there's loads of trees there.
a bit of a state.
Yeah. You know, there's 15 trees.
Yeah, whether any of the trees are such that one would get excited about wanting them retained, I'm not at all sure, frankly.
Wow. It's confused to go.
I put it that side because I don't trip over it and then I knocked it over.
They've done a lot of work on the tree thing.
I mean, I have to say, I think it's quite a well put together application.
Yes,
Um,
they've got the trees in there, in the
There's
tree
trees
thing.
and plants.
yeah, and there is this whole report that's gone in with it.
Actually.
And there you can see the red bit is going to be the development,
It's massive.
and then the blue bit.
You don't realise when you walk past that. Or,
No, because it's all hidden behind that great big stone wall. So it's only when you go into the property itself and look down through the garden. So there's no doubt there's plenty of space. I don't think that putting an extra access into that road is going to be particularly problematic because there'll be plenty of space to turn around and everything else. Highways have just put their sort of standard commenting. In other words, they've said things like, we will require a visibility display of X. There has to be sufficient access and the rest of it.
I've got nothing.
Looking at it, I have to say, I couldn't see any obvious reason for getting.
Bit of infill, isn't it?
It is in effect, I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
the writer of the design and access statement, who's known to us all, has made the point that it meets the need for somewhat smaller properties in Amber, because it's described as being a 3-bedroom property. And quite frankly, they could have easily put a 4 or 5-bedroom property in there, because there is enough space. But I think they made a deliberate play to put a somewhat smaller one in. And I think the way it's done, the impact on Apollo House itself, which is not listed, I should say, is probably minimised, and that's sensible because, of course, they retain the ownership of that, which I think will then be sold off, possibly after they. This I don't know for sure, but it doesn't take a genius to figure out that if they sell off the plot, they will raise money that would enable them to make Apollo House somewhat more special, and then that will go for a lot of money. Apollo House, of course, if you think about it, backs on the courthouse.
Yeah, exactly.
Um,
That is the one area that you could put a house in.
Yeah, I mean-
It's like, house
given what they've looked at that, they've said, you know what, we could get a house in there. We've got a decent set of plans and
I think that's exactly the kind of thing we should be supporting rather than, these massive developments.
They've done a lot there's a lot, I mean, look at New Road. So many, when I first arrived here, there was a lot more spaces, wasn't there, Lisa?
There's, available bit of land.
But
that's
that is
not being
a
used.
substantial bit of land. They could have built a few houses, but to be fair, it's up to them
yes,
what they do.
I think again, possibly they took the view that if they overdevelop the back of it,
Yeah, just.
Even if they got planning permission, they'd so devalue the main house
It's lovely.
that what they gain on the swings, they kind of lose on the roundabouts. I think this is trying to maximise.
That's good.
I think
I think that's nice.
I
That's a
think
no-brainer.
we all seem to be quite happy with that.
Yeah,
So, no objection to that. You'll be pleased to hear the next one is purely discharging conditions, and it's just on the agenda for information.
Oh, it's not long.
Development which
Come on, we know.
sadly,
Well, it's actually just because I've missed a few. We're fighting this, and we're fighting the one at Fairlight. What's the state of play now? Is it just waiting for them to come back with more stuff? I know you've done a lot of work on it, but
which
because
was,
I missed the last planning meeting, I missed the sort of important
in
bit.
terms of the St Christopher's Drive, it's now got its full planning permission.
What from up north?
Yes, Northants have given it full planning permission, so on top of the 130 off Cotterstock Road, St Peter's Road, which currently looks like a lunar landscape with works underway, we are going to fairly shortly have a development going on the other side of town, with yet more construction traffic coming in and out, and attempting to get there down Ashton Road, because there's no way of accessing it. So that
And we've got this one to pass.
so the only other major application, if you like, that is currently outstanding is the Stoke Lower Road.
Yes,
one where
that's it.
we had about 3 iterations of that. We rejected to the most recent, we rejected the 2 previous ones.
Yeah.
We await an outcome to that. The next part of the agenda just simply looks at planning outcomes. Yes, Nine Rock Road got withdrawn. It was one that we had objected to. So that disappeared. We would have had to say something because the owner of the adjoining property had kind of logged me and provided me with all sorts of information about the application, and then it got withdrawn anyway. Then you'll notice the recommendations we made on the matters